On this day in history, January 6th, 1066, following the death of Edward the Confessor on the previous day, the Witan meets to confirm Harold Godwinson as the new King of England. Harold is crowned the same day, sparking a succession crisis that will eventually lead to the Norman conquest of England. Included in the following is an excerpt from the 1944 Encyclopaedia Britannica edition regarding the life of Harold II. Harold II, born circa 1022, died 1066. King of the English, the second son of Earl Godwin, was born about 1022. While still very young, before 1045, he was appointed through his father's influence with Edward the Confessor to the earldom of the East Angles. He shared his father's outlawry and banishment in 1051, but while Godwin went to Flanders, Harold, with his brother Leofwine, took refuge in Ireland. In 1052, the uneasiness felt at the visit to England of William, Duke of Normandy, who was known to covet the English throne, caused a reaction in favor of Godwin, who returned to England with his sons under arms. The Witan finally decreed that their lands should be restored. Harold therefore received his earldom of the East Angles, and on his father's death in 1053 succeeded him in the greater earldom of the West Saxons. Svein having died while on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, Harold was now the chief man in the kingdom, and the later part of Edward's reign was virtually the reign of Harold. On the death, 1055, of Siward, Earl of Northumbria, Edward, at the instigation of Harold, appointed his brother Tostig, Earl of Northumbria. Earl Halfgar looked upon this appointment as a menace to the Mercian house, and his opposition led Harold to procure his outlawry by the Witan. Aelfgar then joined Grofid, Prince of North Wales, in an attack on Hereford, as the result of which Aelfgar regained his position as Earl of East Anglia. In 1057, with the exception of Mercia, Harold and his brothers held all the earldoms throughout England. Aelfgar, in order to secure a useful ally, married his daughter Edelgif to Grofid. Aelfgar died in 1062, and was succeeded by his son Edwin. In spite of the alliance between the Mercians and the Welsh, Harold and Tostig raided Wales in 1063, and forced Grufid, who was eventually killed by his own men, to flee. In 1063, Harold was shipwrecked on the French coast, and captured by the Normans, who only released him on his oath on sacred relics, though at the time he was unaware of their nature, to support William in any claim for the English throne. Probably on his return to England, though the date is uncertain, Harold married Edelgith, Edith, sister of Edwin, and widow of Grufid, thus conciliating the powerful Earl of Mercia. His mistress, Eadgith of the Swan Neck, the mother of his children, was still living. In 1065, the Northumbrians revolted against Tostig's rule, choosing Morkere, brother of Edwin of Mercia, in his place. Harold acted as mediator, but was compelled to agree to the banishment of Tostig, who was thenceforth his bitterest enemy. On January 6, 1066, Edward died, recommending Harold as his successor. He was accordingly elected at once and crowned. He won over the men of Northumbria and prepared against the attacks which threatened on both sides. William challenged the crown, alleging both a bequest of Edward in his favor and Harold's oath, and prepared to invade England. From May to September, Harold kept men and ships in readiness on the south coast, but at last provisions failed, and he returned to London. At this time, Harold Hardrada of Norway, supported by Tostig in the north, invaded England. Together they sailed up the Humber, defeated Edwin and Morkere, and received the submission of York. Harold hurried northwards, and on September 25th won a complete victory over the Northmen at Stamford Bridge, in which Tostig and Harold Hardrada were slain. 2 days later, Harold received news that William had landed at Pevensey, and he marched southward as fast as possible. He gathered his army in London from all southern and eastern England, while Edwin and Morkere held the north. The king then marched into Sussex and engaged the Normans, October 14th, 1066, on the hill of Senlac near Battle. After a fight lasting all day, the Normans had the victory. Harold, wounded by an arrow in the eye, and his 2 brothers, Gurth and Leofwine, lay dead on the field. Harold had 3 sons, Godwine, Edmund, and Magnus, and 2 daughters, probably the children of Edith of the Swan Neck. Another son was named Ulf. By his wife, Eldgith, who was sent for safety to Chester in 1066, he had a posthumous son, Harold, who took part in the expedition of Magnus barefoot to the Scottish Isles in 1098. Harold's body is said to have been taken from the cairn of stones on the seashore where it was originally buried to Waltham.